think about the balls of granite
Yeah.
that our
Jeez.
founding fathers had. When you think about what they were doing, it's called treason. They were going against the king saying, no, I'm out. And if they were caught, they would have been summarily hung and tarred, feathered, quartered, whatever you want to say, however it would have been done. And they knew it. Not only them, all of their estate would be confiscated. Their families would probably meet the same fate as them. They were literally putting everything
Everything.
on the line
Everything.
for the purpose of being free men.
Welcome to the Republic Podcast, where history meets scrutiny and facts matter. Join Rob and Lou as they dive deep into the foundations of American democracy, dissect the laws that shape our lives, and challenge the narratives behind today's headlines. From forgotten chapters in the U.S. history to the legal truths they didn't teach you in school. This is your front row seat to get informed, unapologetic conversation. We have an American republic, if we can keep it. Now, let's get started. Another week down. And of course, since we are near Memorial Day, we had it. And we're talking about the greatest breakup letter in America and in the world history. I had to wear this today.
That is tremendous.
Well, today, Rob, we're going to be talking about the Declaration of Independence. The world's greatest breakup letter ever.
That is the best way to describe it. I love that. The greatest breakup letter ever. And as we had talked about in our introductory / first foray into all this series we're going to be doing, we talked about whether we do this chronologically from the French and Indian War, going through American history, and we thought it best, let's start with the foundational pieces of this country.
Right.
And you got to start with the Declaration of Independence.
I mean, because again, as we've said, you have to know from where you begin, and of course, the foundational documents are the most important part. We'll get to the history of everything else at some other points, but we figured that this is the most important thing.
And as we talked about before, the reason we're doing this, not only because we're just entertaining ourselves, for God's sakes, but we've seen over the past 20, 30 years, and especially accelerated over the past 10 to 15, this erosion of appreciation for American history, or why American history is important, why the United States is important, why the principles that founded this country are important. So let's get into it.
Right. Because, you can't have, one thing that I spit my coffee out on earlier this week was hearing a politician saying, well, if something was that important, it would have been in the Constitution. And it's like, it is. But,
I know that quote. I heard that too, and I went, oh,
that's going to leave a mark.
Oh.
But
and you are in Congress, and you never even read the Constitution. So bring in Lou and Rob.
Bring in the clowns, I guess, but no.
No.
So again, why is the Declaration of Independence so important? Because again, it's one of the foundational documents of American history. This is the one that said, Britain, UK, it's not us, it's you. And it's not, we can't be a better us because we don't want to be a better us. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
we have, for people to put you in the mindset, let's go back in time. The Declaration of Independence, everyone knows Independence Day is July 4th of 1776. Please tell me that you know it. And even if you don't know it, don't admit it out loud. Now you do know it. July 4th, 1776. What was happening in July of 1776? Well, at that point in time, the American Revolution had already started. The conflict really had already kicked off. Lexington and Concord in 1775, with the shot heard round the world. And between that time and the summer of 1776, the colonies were feeling their oats. They're feeling pretty good about themselves because they had the Brits on the run. The Brits had been forced out of Boston, and they were moved into New York City. There hadn't been a significant loss for the colonials, you want to call them that, the colonists.
Yeah,
And so
American.
at that point in time, Britain hadn't really geared up for war because they thought that these were just this rabble, this kind of insurrection was going to go away pretty quickly. Those reinforcements would be coming soon, but at that point in time, in early of 1776, hadn't happened yet. But with the conflict already started, people started talking, well, why are we doing this? And
Right.
hence,
And I mean, that's where, that's where it started going. That's where people started saying this is wrong. We've all heard about the Boston Tea Party and all these things, but there was all these other small skirmishes along the way, all these other incursions, all these other things that built up to that point. That that the colonists were finally at the breaking point where they finally said, "This is it." That we don't want to do this anymore. We feel that we'd rather go out on our own and take our chances. But the
no,
one thing though,
not all the colonists thought that way.
exactly. I was just
They
saying,
were of everyone who was a colonist was a British citizen. I mean, they really hadn't had all of the people from, the Scotch Irish come over and all, but predominantly British citizens. And they'd lived under the British, and their parents had been under the British rule, and et cetera, from time immemorial throughout their genealogy. And in the West, everyone lived under some sort of monarchy, Spanish monarchy, the French, British, and they all had their colonies all over the world. So we were no different than most other places, whether it would be Mozambique, whether it be in, what is now Mexico, all sorts of. But there was a faction that said, you know what? We don't want to live under a monarchy anymore. We want self-rule and self-independence.
shit has hit the fan and we're done. But
Exactly it.
but again, I mean, but it's scary. And that's really what some of these loyalists thought. And that so when everybody was saying that this was a done deal and that America was gonna get its freedom, it really wasn't. It was a close call, closer than most people think, where you had factions where in the Continental Congress, where when the Declaration of Independence came up, they were saying no. And it was really a lot of last minute maneuvering by some of the big names, by Washington, by Jefferson, by many others that really sort of kept this thing going. Because otherwise, the movement was going to die on the vine.
And trying to distill this into a video, I mean, we can go on for days and days to go through all of the minutia. I'll leave it to say this. The Continental Congress had been established and was in Philadelphia. The motion for independence came from, I think, the House of Burgesses in Virginia. They posited a question to be posed to the Continental Congress saying basically, hey, bruh, why can't we be independent? And the Continental Congress gets this and says, let's form a committee and let's see what we can do. The first vote on it, as Lou said, it was not a slam dunk by any stretch. There were plenty of people in the Continental Congress who said, no, we don't want independence. We don't want to break free. We're Englishmen. We are upset with the way that they have handled us and treated us, but we've never been independent. We don't want to be independent now. And we actually kind of like the safety of being under the umbrella of the British sphere of influence.
I mean, it was basically, you're talking, we were acting like, 25-year-olds living in our mom's house. It's comfy. It's easy. We get food. We get protection. And we really don't have to do a lot other than just pay taxes. But, it really took the movement of Adams, Franklin, Jefferson to really say, yo, bro, nah, this ain't how it's supposed to go. This is not, we really need to look at our independence, because if it isn't for that, then we will forever be under the rule of somebody else. There will be no self-determination.
Think about the balls of granite
Yeah.
that our
Jeez.
founding fathers had. When you think about what they were doing, it's called treason. They were going against the king, saying, no, I'm out. And if they were caught, they would have been summarily hung and tarred, feathered, quartered, whatever you want to say, however it would have been done. And they knew it. Their farm, not only them, all of their estate would be confiscated. Their families would probably meet the same fate as them. They were literally putting everything
Everything,
on the line
everything.
for the purpose of being free men. And I hesitate there, because a lot of people who will be watching this video would say, well, of course, it's just white men. It's crazy white men. Think about the time. You can't superimpose the 21st century on the 18th century and say, why didn't they have these norms then? It would have been nice in many situations, certainly, but they didn't have it. It wasn't there. Right at that point in time in 1776, it was the white men who were leading the things. And that's not saying that's good, bad, and different. I'm just saying what it was. But the Declaration of Independence was the first step in opening everyone's eyes to something different. All men are created equal.
And yeah, and that's the first step. I mean, that is the Declaration of Independence is an ideal that these founding fathers put forth, saying this is what we will strive for, knowing that we're not going to achieve it right away. But that doesn't mean that this document should be set aside or disregarded. These are the ideals upon which this country is founded, and which this country still follows, and which all of us should strive to follow as well. And
this is an
and
aspirational country.
right.
We are not set in stone to say, this is the way it's always been, the way it's always will be. We are aspiring to always be better men and women. We are always aspiring to be that better sense of selves going forward. And this document is the very first step in that American aspirational.
And now is the first step for America. This was the first time that this was ever done in world history.
True.
A country, a colony declaring freedom from their own king. There had been fights, and there had been riots, and there had been other things throughout history that have been similar, but nothing like this, where they're saying, yeah, we're done. Here it is. Suck it. All right.
I think that was in one of the first drafts that were submitted by Thomas Jefferson, and thou shall suck it.
And you will suck it. No, but it was one, and it was a document that was really one where it said the most important thing is self-determination. That is what this document is all about, is saying that we want to be able to determine our own fate, our own history. We need to be able to go forward, and we need to be able to do this on our own. And this is what it was. First time ever. There were many documents that it was based upon. The Magna Carta, the Virginia documents, the Federalist Papers, a lot of other things that sort of built into this, which we'll be talking about in another episode. But it's something that this was the first time ever that something like this came about.
Right. Now, in what we're going to talk about, and we have been talking about here, how did this document come about? What makes it so special? We're going to get into the exact text of it and parse through it in our next episode next week. But right now, I want everyone out there to understand what it was like. Put yourselves in the shoes of the people in the Continental Congress who were saying, we want independence. And we already talked about how this was treason and what would happen to them. There were 5 people who were assigned to form a committee. Once there was an actual vote saying, yes, let's explore this bit about independence. And those 5 members were John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman, and Thomas Jefferson. They gave the role, once they knew that this was building momentum and was going toward a final vote for independence, they gave the task to Jefferson to do the writing because they didn't think it was that important. And that's no disrespect to Thomas Jefferson, but he was the youngest of the 5, if I remember correctly. And they knew that he wrote very well, but they thought that the vote itself, John Adams spoke about this later in his life, that the vote he thought would be the thing. We just talk about the vote. It wasn't the document necessarily, but history has shown us it's been the document. The vote's very important, but everyone knows and should know and understand the document. And Thomas Jefferson at the time, I think, was in his early 30s. Lou's talked about this. Imagine, this is like your 25-year-old living in your mother's basement. In today's day and time, imagine being 30 years old or thereabout, early 30s. Hey, I need you to write this Declaration of Independence, which will be earth-shattering and will help us separate from Great Britain. Never been done before. Can you write? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, write that.
With no Grok, no Chat GPT, no AI, no internet, nothing other than just what you've already read. Because it's not like he had a chance to say, let me go. I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to think about this. I'll get back to you. Like, when you're in college, you get to write a term paper in what? An entire semester? Yeah. So we're going to give this to you. We're going to give this to you. And you got like a day.
You had a couple of weeks, but it's okay.
I'm trying to be dramatic. Come on.
I appreciate that. So here's this 30-some-odd-year-old guy, and he writes what is, in my opinion, probably the most moving document in American history.
World history.
Now, there's a whole litany of a 28-count indictment against the king as to the reasons why we're looking for independence. The greatest breakup letter of all. It's not me, it's you. Or maybe it's you, not me. I don't know. Help me, help you, help me. But the preamble, those first paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence, the prose that is used there should resonate with everyone in this country. And it is not too much to ask that people go back and reread it.
I mean, everybody knows the first few lines. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created.
And that
they are endowed
most of it ends.
Yeah.
That's what people know that. And it's like, okay, what now? But
or they think that's it.
Right. No. But as Rob said, the other thing that made this great was this wasn't just something that's like, a flowing, feathery type of idealistic thing. This was also an indictment against the king. This was like, screw you, and here's the reasons why we're telling you to screw off. Here you go, buddy.
But the document itself, what makes it so special is that, number one, it's the first time that anything like this had ever been done. Number two, the gravity of what was being done by the people who were doing it. Like I said, they had balls of stone. Their lives, their livelihoods, their families, everything was literally put on the line for this, for the sake of freedom, for the sake of self-determination. And the words that were put into play largely by Jefferson, there were some edits made, as I understand, by Franklin, but not many. The words that were used and were read to the colonists after its ratification were so moving that in all of the contemporary news articles of the time and people who wrote in their diaries about it, they talk about how it was the most moving prose that they had heard in their lifetimes. It spurred them to action. It spurred them to understand and appreciate we don't need to live under the yoke of some monarch. We should be able to make our own determinations about our own lives, about the way we govern ourselves. And again, never had been done before in this way.
And each word had significant meaning. That we throw around the word liberty and freedom like it means nothing. Using those words back then, that was huge. That was, and as Rob said, this was a call, not just a breakup letter, but a call to action for the colonists, for something for them to rally behind so that they can say, this is what we are doing. This is why we are doing this. And we are willing not just to speak out and protest against this, but to put our lives, the lives of our families, and everything that we have on the line. We're willing to die for this freedom. And that's how significant it meant to them.
Mm-hmm. And we were but a small little outpost on a faraway shore against the greatest navy at the time the world had ever known, and probably the greatest power at the time. They had already beaten the French in the French and Indian War. The Spanish government still had influence in the New World, but mostly south of the colonies. But it was the British that was the standard. And here we are, these 13 colonies saying, no, we're going to stand on our own 2 feet, take your stuff and go home. Balls of stone.
So what does that mean at this point? It means that as Rob said, the preamble, the language of itself, that's something we'll be covering next week. And that's something that we'll, as we go into it, we'll explain what is the preamble, why it's so important, where it draws from, the different documents that drew the language from, the history of it, and the significance of it, breaking it down line by line, because it's something that is just so significant that everybody should know what it means. And that's something where, as we said before, we'll get into next episode.
And in the comments down below, we always ask you to put some stuff in. We'll answer whatever it is. But we'll also put in the links to the actual declaration. So every one of you out there, by the time we reconnect next week, we expect your homework will be done and you will have read it, so that when we talk about the exact terms next week, we're going to do it in lockstep.
And don't forget, click, like, share, all that kind of good stuff, because it's only with your support that we can keep this going. Because as we've said before, Rob and I could sit here and talk amongst ourselves and drink a lot of good bourbon and whiskey and just enjoy ourselves. But we'd like to have you come along for the ride.
Shut up and sit down.
Thanks for listening to The Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast. Join Rob and Lou in our next episode as we continue our riveting discussions on the most important topics affecting our great republic. Drop a line for topics you want to discuss, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.